Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have a very special guest, AJ Morris. He is based out of the UK and he's a natural pro bodybuilder and founder and owner of Team Made by Morris. And I was telling him off air, him and Steve Hall were one of the first guys I started following in the online space back in, I think around 2017. I was doing my first natural bodybuilding prep. And I think that's how I came across you guys. I'm honestly not sure. I was thinking about that before we hopped on here, but either way, it's been really cool to see you and Steve's growth, like I said, business-wise and just from a muscle gaining perspective as well during that period of time. So really happy to have you on here, AJ. And thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure, Jeff. I appreciate you having me on amongst many of your extremely high caliber guests. So looking forward to the discussion. And again, also thank you very much for sort of following both mine and Steve's journey over the course of many years. Me and Steve actually used to be located quite close to each other. So we met up quite a few times in that 2017 prep. Now we live a little bit further apart, but still very much on that same direction, continuing to grow in our own sectors.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you guys kind of know each other before that time frame, or was that kind of how you guys got connected? Was you guys were both prepping and stuff like that?
So it's a good question, actually. I think it's as early as 2015, maybe even 2014, because Steve did a prep in 14. And I remember following that myself because I was also prepping as a teenager for one of my first shows. And he was sort of filming YouTube videos, still when YouTube videos were very new. No one had videographers and everyone was doing it on their phone. And yeah, it was probably, one of those first sort of natural bodybuilders that I have followed as well as Matt Ogus and things like that. So yeah, and then I guess sort of 2015, we were at similar seminars together. So we were at the 3DMJ conference when they came over to the UK. I started to go to his seminars when he brought Mike over, and we kind of connected through there. Obviously now I think, both of us living quite far away, and equally, I think we've both gone down quite different paths in terms of beliefs in training, and we both really respect each other still, but I think we just have quite differing opinions. So, obviously we catch up at shows and things like that, but we don't really see each other as much anymore. But yeah, he's still a good friend of mine. I respect everything he does.
Awesome. Yeah. And I kind of want to hit on those, kind of training beliefs here at some point during this episode. Another thing that popped up to me too, that I remember that was really helpful was, I think you made this probably around that same time, 2017, 2018. I think it was a YouTube video about how to grow your online business. And that was super helpful for me as well too. I think you still kind of talk about that video from time to time. Was that one of your most popular ones that you had?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's two pieces of content on my socials that I always refer people back to when they ask me questions. And one of them's business, and then I send them to that video, or the podcast I recorded with George, which again, it's people nowadays obviously want, a mentorship or, someone to direct them in every given step. But the basics of what is held in those two videos of the fundamentals, if you apply them and you're consistent, I've seen numerous businesses apply that same model and make amazing progress. So that model, whether it be a model or not, it's just caring, attention to detail, learning. It's all of those things. If you apply that, business is going to grow. And then the other piece of content is the podcast I made with JP back in 2015, which is such a bare knuckles podcast, which is brings a lot of people back down to earth in terms of how to build muscle. And, I mean, for me, just listening to JP talk is motivating. So I bring a lot of people back to that podcast. And again, those two pieces of content for me are some of the building blocks of a lot of people's success.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's obviously, if that many people, take that much out of it, obviously it was very, very helpful. And I guess with JP, did you have him on your kind of podcast in that? That was one that you had him on.
Yeah, I did. That was back in 2015. And that was when I was running a podcast called Team Muscle Radio. That was my first sort of ever venture down the podcast route. That podcast initially was it started off as just interviewing other teenage bodybuilders and trying to gain awareness for that class, that category. And it was really popular at the time, teenage bodybuilding, actually. And, it was growing a good, little reputation. And that was also where my niche was within coaching. I was coaching generally a little bit younger people. So I was trying to get into that space a little bit more, talk to people, learn how they made progress, and essentially try and learn more myself. And then it evolved into, because Steve was building his at that point as well, And I noticed he was interviewing, you know, bigger guests, and I was trying to play catch up a little bit and wanting to interview other guests as well. So I got people on from different sectors. And yeah, I mean, when I look back, I was, you know, 18, 19 years old, talking to some of the brightest minds in the game, you know, Scott Stevenson, Corin, JP, you know, just like getting my foot in the door a little bit. And, you know, it's lucky with people like Jordan, especially, who would always give his time. You know, I remember emailing him when I was 19. I just said, I have this podcast. Do you mind coming on? I got a reply within like 5 minutes saying, yeah, I love these things, bud. Like, what time works for you? And, you know, he always gave me the time. And he said in a recent video, how he will notice people over the course of time that are just doing the work, you know, just consistently doing the work. And I'm sure that maybe when I emailed him, he maybe had a scroll on my Instagram just to see what I was doing, and, you know, maybe saw my work, which was just at that point loads of different lifts, you know, deadlift, squats, whatever it was. And he was like, okay, you know, he's been doing the work for this long, you know, I'll give this guy my time and come on the podcast and educate other people in his little sector. So yeah, I've been very, very lucky in that sense. And I think that, again, sort of one of the tips or take homes, if a younger person is listening to this, is like, just do the work. And then, you know, when the right time is there to like put your foot in the door, whether it be asking for a discussion or a coaching call, or trying to get into that circle where these people that you respect are actually going to like follow your progress and, you know, be involved in it, and, you know, really keep tabs with what you're getting up to. Just keep doing the work. And, you know, eventually that will become a reality where these people are like kind of following you a little bit, which is good.
And I definitely can attest to that, for like, again, following you and Steve for so long. Like I said, both of you guys have both really just like, it's cool because, you know, a lot of times you find people on social media and I feel like you just kind of see where they're at now. You don't really see where they've come from. Right. And again, I think being able to like see you guys kind of grow in the last five plus years has been really cool to see, to just show that, hey, like, it is just all about just putting in that work consistently and just staying consistent with it. So, cause, you know, just with a lot of stuff, it's like, you only see where people are at now. You don't see that kind of come up part of it. And that's, it's encouraging to see that, because, you know, you're like, hey, I can do this too. If I, you know, if I just stay consistent with it.
Yeah, very, very true. Very, very true. It is a game of consistency, and there's numerous people in the fitness industry that will come in and maybe make quite a significant mark over the course of like a year period. You know, 12 months, they might be quite substantial, well known, followed, etc. Be someone that, you know, people are going to for coaching, or whether it's just following them for content, education. And then, you know, the next year they're not there. You know, there's a lot of people like that I can sort of know off the top of my head. It is an industry where you have to also have very thick skin, because there's so many different beliefs. You know, you scroll your Instagram feed one day and, you know, you think you're doing everything right, or things optimally, as we like to call it now, and then someone else is telling you you're doing it wrong. So I think, again, advice, take homes to younger individuals, people coming up, is like, you know, set your beliefs, be open-minded, but then when people try and knock you down for things that are evidently working with your clients or with yourself, have thick skin, you know, stand up for yourself, be open-minded. Yes, if you're doing something that can be done better, great, open your mind and accept that, and try and, you know, challenge your own beliefs. But at the same time, be thick-skinned enough to be like, okay, I'll take that on its head, but I'm getting results. I'm getting people on stage, or people through photo shoots or fat loss, whatever it is, with great success, and they're achieving their goals. You know, my methods work and they're ethical. So there's so many ways to skin a cat in this game, and, you know, staying true to your beliefs whilst being a little open-minded is really the key, I think.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And like you said, you do see that a lot more. I feel like, at least it seems like I don't know if it's always been this way, but it definitely seems like in the last year or two, it's like really picked up in terms of people just really promoting their methods, and, like you said, doing things optimally. And I think it's great, right? Like you said, to just kind of have that discussion, and, you know, people have different beliefs, but it's like, you know, it's not, you don't have to, it's not religion, right? Like, you don't have to freaking, you know, stand by it, you know, and like you said, have that open mind, and that can be super helpful. So for you, just wanted to briefly kind of touch on, like, I mean, we've hit on it a pretty good amount already, but maybe just like background in terms of, like, I don't know, maybe the last couple of years for you in terms of, like, you know, fitness, and how specifically maybe you have grown in the last few years there with that.
Sure, no problem. So in terms of myself competitively, so I started competing in 2014. Like I said, as a teenager, I did a couple of seasons as a teenage bodybuilder, 2014, 2015, 2015 being the more successful of the two, winning a qualifier show, competing at a couple of British finals, nothing amazing. I wasn't one of those bodybuilders that came right out the gate and started winning everything. I had good feedback, and people always told me you got good potential and good shape, good structure. Just need a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. Like I said, back then, teenage bodybuilding was a damn hard class. I remember in 15, there was about 16 of us on stage at a British final. And the last 3 or 4 years, there's been no more than 4 or 5 bodybuilders in the British final. So they've been good, don't get me wrong, really good teenage bodybuilders, and the level keeps going up. But the depth was so high back then. So I'm not really sure as to why that's happening, but that seems to be occurring now. I think a lot more people are willing to invest more time before they compete, which I think is a good thing, because you're seeing the junior classes now. Some of those guys just look like men's open guys straight away, because they've just actually, instead of competing as a teenager, they've spent 5-6 years away in the gyms, hiding, getting strong as hell, and come out when they're 23 years old and they just look like fully grown men. So that was that. And then I came back to the stage in 2017 after a year off season as a junior. And that was my sort of standout year as a competitor. I only lost one show where I came second. So I did the BNBF and UKDFBA over here, which is like the main federations. Won my qualifying shows, second with the BNBF in the British final. Won the UKDFBA British final, went to Worlds with the WNBF at that point, and won. They had the junior class back then. They don't have it anymore, but they had the juniors, and I won the World Championships there. And then after that, that was like, okay, I'm pretty good at bodybuilding. I can be a good bodybuilder, and that obviously made me very excited for my own athletic journey. But it also really elevated me as a coach. As much as it really shouldn't. Did I change as a coach in that time period? Yes, I learned more, and I was able to find what really helps athletes be good, which a lot of it is up here. It's like, how hard can you push this? So I was able to then cross-transfer those skills that I learned as an athlete that made me a good athlete to client bases. And then obviously I started getting, really, really good results. I first started on the online side of things in 2015 after 2 years of one-to-one personal training. So that was then really, really sort of like snowballing and growing, and Team MBM then sort of grew to where it is at right now, where since 2018, it's been, a full roster of clients every year, people getting on stage. Obviously the COVID years affected it a little bit in terms of people actually getting on stage, but the progression of the business has still been there, and coaching some awesome people across the globe at the moment, and very grateful to be in the position to be able to do that. So that's like the coaching side of things. And then as an athlete, again, I gone on stage in 2020. And that's when I gained the sort of the PNBA pro status, which I haven't yet. Actually, I didn't accept the pro status there because I wanted to win more amateur shows. And to be a pro, to basically turn pro, you have to compete as a pro. So you can earn your pro status and decide to not use it if you don't feel you gained it in the right manner, which I didn't, because it was the COVID years and the competition level was good, don't get me wrong, but I've always wanted to win an overall British title to be then granted pro status. And I also wanted to be at a competitive pro level, which I just don't think I was at that point. And so I went again in 2021 and won the British title that I wanted to get. And then, that was a really good competitive season. That was also when the UKDFBA changed paths to affiliating with the INBA, PNBA. So we now go to their European Championships and their World Championships as a sort of like platform. And just a bit of a discussion on that front, because I think when it comes to pivotal people or influence in my own bodybuilding journey, and to be honest, in my entire life, probably one of the biggest influences in my entire life has been like the UKDFBA and the friendships that I've made through that. And, Lee and Amy, who run the UKDFBA, I first kind of like got close to them and met them in 2017 when I was able to come out with them to the World Championships at that point. And then ever since then, they've kind of been like family to me in terms of, just being people that I really respect and like and get on really well with. And that's to me, what bodybuilding is all about is it's about forming relationships, having people that support your journey. And they're like that with so many people that come through the door. You know, if you compete with the UK FBA and you go on their world's team, or you even, you know, you just compete at their shows, they'll treat you like family. You know, it's just a really, really close knit, like natural bodybuilding isn't big. So it's a really close knit community. And yeah, they've been like so integral in terms of me being able to like do what I do. So yeah, that's, if you want to compete naturally, you should definitely look at the UK FBA. It's a great place to compete. And equally in the UK, the BNBF are a great federation as well. Those are the two real like standout federations here in the UK at the moment. So yeah, and then like out after that, really, like, I mean, the recent things have been obviously the website with Natural Bodybuilding Worldwide, and trying to create a platform for natural athletes through video content, a forum, you know, trying to create a little bit more of a following for the sport. And equally allowing athletes to have a, you know, an actual, like I said, a platform where it's only natural athletes, only natural based content on the site, which is, I think, an important thing, an important step, because for a lot of younger individuals coming up, you know, they're immediately attracted towards, you know, following a lot of assisted bodybuilders and setting that as their parameters and goals. Whereas if they come to this, you know, this platform, this site, it doesn't mean they have to stay natural their entire training career, but it gives them an option. It gives them, you know, excitement to follow people's natural journeys, a realization of what is possible, a realization of the opportunities, like to travel, to compete abroad, to compete in the USA, whatever it may be. You know, there are several great opportunities as a natural athlete. And I think people just don't realize that they're there, if I'm honest, before they go into the assisted realm. So that's been my recent sort of like business move and progression. And that's something that I really hope will continue to grow and offer a great platform for natural bodybuilding well into the future.
Yeah, no, that's really cool, man. I know that I was curious to kind of hear, you know, where you're in terms of business, where you're kind of headed out there with that. I'm sure your coaching business, Team Made by Morris, I'm sure is still high on the priority list, but, you know, also doing some other things on top of that, and really trying to grow natural bodybuilding, which I think is great, right? Because I agree with you. I think a lot of people don't realize how far you can take it with the natural route before feeling like you have to go, you know, like you said, straight into, you know, assisted bodybuilding or things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think just more people need to be aware of it, really. It's like a lot of people just don't know that there even are natural shows that are legitimately drug tested, you know, and then people maybe new to it, they don't think they really are drug tested. So, you know, you just have to go to them to experience it and compete in them to experience it as well, and see the differences in the physiques as well. Because of course you carry like a hell of a lot less muscle, but it's a different look. You know, the natural look is a different look. It's not the same as an assisted look. Like, there's a different look to the muscle, the different look to the shape you can kind of keep, and the lines you can keep. Like, there's some amazing pro bodybuilders that kept like most of their lines, but there's a lot of pro bodybuilders that as they have to grow, you know, have to get bigger and bigger. Like, who's going to beat Rami if they're not going to get absolutely like ridiculously massive? You know, that then their lines like kind of do fade a little, and the amount of food you have to eat distends the stomach a little, and like, you know, and then the health risk, you know, as well. Like, I'm not like just listing off cons, but, you know, there's plenty of pros if you go down that route as well. Like, of course, you know, then people do it for their own reasons. But, you know, if you want to be the best of the best in that realm, you've got to be willing to either you have an amazing genetic set point, or you're willing to do stuff that is really going to put your health on the line. So, you know, natural bodybuilding is an option where, yes, it's not the healthiest. At the end of a prep, your blood work's still going to not look great whatsoever. But as long as you do it well and you periodize your phases well, and you're smart and you have good direction, you can make natural bodybuilding last a long time. As competitors, Philip Ricardo Jr., you know, those kind of individuals that are competing at a very high level well into their 50s, you know, you can make this happen for a long time. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. It's like you said, if you do it right, you can definitely make it last for a while. And I was actually just to see if there was anything I wanted to like add on to what I wanted to talk about. I was kind of going through your Instagram a little bit ago, and it's pretty crazy, like how shredded, you know, you you get now, I feel like not just you, but just in general with natural bodybuilding. Like you said, you really see a lot of those lines there. And I know like you got super shredded for your last show. I know, Alberto Nunez just finished one, he looked super shredded. And then there was, I think one of his clients, Dirk, I mean, again, they got super shredded. Like
it's another level. Yeah.
it's pretty crazy to see that. And it seems like, the kind of the standard gets raised year after year with it. I guess for you then, like based on all that kind of, again, your background with everything, is there anything that, now that you know more, you've obviously gained more insight on everything. Would there be anything that you would maybe do a little bit differently, like early in your bodybuilding career that you're not doing now, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely would have like tried to. I mean, if I'm honest, there wasn't as much there wasn't as much out there in terms of your ability to learn about training.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so much more content out there at the moment that can teach you just a ridiculous amount about training. And that's where, there's pros and cons. People get lost in that and end up going down a path where they're just constantly over assessing everything they're doing. But at the same time, there's massive pros in the sense that people can set up their training in such an effective manner, like from a 17 or 18-year-old. I have a lot of young clients now that are doing stuff that, took me years to try and figure out.
Yeah.
So I'd have probably made a little bit more progress in that time period. But to be honest, I look back and I really wouldn't have changed anything, if I'm honest, because it made me who I am now and it got me to where I'm at business wise. I think there's an element of just, being, in the trenches a little bit when it comes to competing and earning your stripes a little bit and doing multiple seasons that then gives you a level of knowledge of like all the processes and how it makes you feel, how you learn things, so without those like 5 contest preps in the books and at 26 years old, I don't think I would be where I am now. So yeah, lessons to be learned, but I wouldn't necessarily change anything.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, right? Yeah, you definitely just have lessons that you could have learned, or the lessons that you have learned, but there's not anything that you would do differently. We kind of hit on this. You were talking about like teenage bodybuilding, and I would imagine, or kind of around that time, do you think that like, I mean, genetics are always going to play a role in building muscle, but do you feel like at that period of time, just because people really haven't put a ton of time in at that time, do you think at that point it's like, obviously just training is going to be helpful, but like in terms of genetics aspect of it, do you think at that point in time that's going to play a massive role there, like at the beginning part of the journey?
Yeah, totally. Because the ones that were doing well were the ones that lifted a dumbbell and just grew substantially in their first couple of years of training. They were like, oh my God, I'm big enough to compete now. So I think, yeah, definitely in the first, it's why I say to like some people when it comes to going down the enhanced route, not to keep referencing this, but if you want to be at the top of the tree, you're gonna know that quite quick.
Mm-hmm.
If you're training relatively well and you're managing your nutrition, you're gonna probably know whether you've got like the genetic code to get all the way to the top of the tree or close. You're going to know that maybe in 2 or 3 years of training, I think. And, you see this with a lot of natural bodybuilders where they are incredibly good after a short period of time. They are, as a junior bodybuilder, stepping into men's open lineups, looking like a full-grown adult with muscle hanging off them, Those are the people that are very genetically endowed to build muscle tissue. So, I mean, obviously, you never know what it's like when they go on, assisted side and what androgen receptors they have, etc. But the fact is, they've grown very, very well out of the box, so they're probably going to grow even better when they go down that route. So, yeah, it's something to definitely consider when you're younger. Is that if you do things right, you're going to know relative potential pretty soon, and then you can start to like optimize several different things that even if you don't have like a good genetic set point, you can still do extremely well. You're just going to have to work pretty smart, pretty hard for a long time. And, you can still get to a really good level in the sport. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like any sport, there's people that are going to be able to, everybody works hard, right? Like there's no denying that you're going to have to work hard, but some people are just going to be able to, get away with less quote unquote optimal training than somebody else that might have to dial in something else. And that's just part of the process. But I think it's probably tricky in terms of like, you find out if you're going to be able to go really far with it, but at the same time, like we talked about, there's that consistency aspect of it and like just sticking with it year over year that I feel like is, that you just want to be careful that you don't give up too soon because you think
Of
that you don't
course.
have like great genetics or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with reference to you're finding out how good you are in 2 to 3 years, that really is only if you want to be probably Mr. Olympia,
Yeah.
like that's literally it. Like, could you still be top five? Maybe, yeah. It's a case of course, working for many, many years over a long span of time to really get to your potential and like natural potential wise. That's something that again you really won't be figuring that out until you're in your mid to late 30s. So yeah, consistency over time, and you'll eventually find where you can potentially get. That's for sure.
So I guess based off that, then, you kind of hit on it, mid-30s, stuff like that. Where do you feel like for you? I mean, you're somebody that, we would consider very advanced. How do you feel about where you're at in that regard in terms of your potential and like how, I guess how do you feel about that in terms of, just your potential with everything where you can go like moving forward?
Sure. So I think that based off what I've seen, a lot of other athletes do over a period of time, and in terms of adding muscle as a natural bodybuilder, I genuinely think I can be progressing year on year all the way until I'm in my late 30s, if I'm honest. I don't see my physique staying the same or going backwards until at least then, if not much later, maybe into my mid 40s. Obviously, touch wood, that depends on, health and, injuries and things like that. But, with how things have gone, even this last year, I do think I can make considerable progress year in, year out. So in terms of like, pounds added, you never know because, I think it's a hard one to judge, but I pretty much added about roughly 10 pounds of actual stage weight from my 2017 prep to 2021. And you've really got to count that as only a 2 year off season because I prepped in 2020. So, I dieted the whole year that year, so I wouldn't have really built any tissue. So yeah, maybe something like 4 or 5 pounds a year of muscle. Like I don't think that's impossible. I think that's more than possible when you nail every single variable. I think if you're more balanced with it, which I totally respect, but if you're a little bit more balanced with it and you're maybe not eating every meal and you're not sleeping 9 hours a night or 8 hours a night and you're not, training the way that I think is going to give you the most progress and, training accurately, all of those kind of things, then maybe you're building less. But I think 4 to 5 pounds is definitely more than possible as an actual per year in a very sort of well set up off season.
Yeah. Well, like I said with you, I know definitely from 2017 to then the last time, I guess it would have been the next time, 2020, definitely could tell that you put on a ton of tissue like during that period of time for sure. Like I have no doubt in my mind you put on, 10 pounds during that period of time for sure. You could just tell that. And I think again, part of it probably just came again with more experience. And as you get older, like you're just going to keep adding more muscle. I'm sure that was part of it, but we'll dive into kind of your training and nutrition variables and stuff like that. I'm sure that obviously played a massive role in it, but I think part of it too is you just were consistent with it. And like, again, as you get older too, that's obviously going to help you get more of a just, I feel like fuller, bigger look overall, and obviously
Yeah,
more
no, for sure.
tissue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Cool. So that kind of leads me to my next topic then, just kind of chatting about your current training and nutrition, maybe what you're doing now. And then I know you're in a like massing phase. So I do want to kind of dive into that a little bit more. So maybe just kind of chat about what your kind of current training and nutrition looks like as right now.
For sure. So current training wise, in terms of sort of setup, I think, my beliefs obviously in terms of training are that, I train pretty much every working set to its true failure point consistently every single week until I hit a period of time where fatigue is high. And then I'll take a devolume or some time off the gym. So either 4 days off or a week with reduced volume. And typically in those weeks of reduced volume, I won't be progressing the logbook. I logbook all of my training, so I'll have numbers to beat week in, week out. The goal is, of course, to beat those numbers, but there is a standardization to that approach. And what that is essentially is trying to keep execution as close as I can to the previous working set. And that involves, of course, the tempo of the set, the overall execution across the board, the even like, little things like, not taking extended periods of rest between one exercise to another, trying to keep the session flow pretty similar so that the standardization of all controllable variables is pretty much there. You know, I'm not trying to grab progression by making something easier. I'm trying to make things as difficult as they can be to progress within the same confines. So that's the typical way that I approach training. I think that this has been something that I have done. I kind of fell into that in 2017 when I sort of like really started following Jordan, so Jordan Peters, and I started to get an idea of what hard training really looks like. Because prior to then, I was definitely being exposed to more of the, I think it was like almost like a bit of a powerlifting, bodybuilding hybrid setup where, you know, a lot of people at that time were following Lane Norton or Matt August, and there was a lot of like daily undulating periodization going around with different rep schemes. And you know, at that point, I was definitely leaving, you know, more reps on the table to complete sets like, you know, maybe a 3x6 or a 4x4 or something like that on a barbell squat or something like that. So it's kind of a combination of powerlifting and bodybuilding to a degree. It helped me get really strong at a lot of movements, but I was still like, I was leaving reps on the table with probably a lot of those exercises. So, you know, then the end of that year, I started reducing my volume and reducing my training frequency a little bit. So I went down from training as much as I used to train close to 7 times a week. I was just a bit overzealous with what I could actually do and thinking more was better. And don't get me wrong, you know, like more work is more work if you can recover from it. But there becomes a case in which that work is just diminishing in terms of the quality. So whether it was the back end of the session, the quality would be poor, or the back end of a microcycle, if you can even call 7 days a week a microcycle, because it's just a never ending mesocycle, really. So like it was something that I needed to address because I was running into a lot of problems with regards to like just injuries and general fatigue. And it's not a surprise because I was basically getting minimal rest, you know, 6 or 7 sessions a week. And that just shows again, I had way more injuries being weaker and training with more volume and more frequency than I have now being at my absolute strongest, training with less frequency and less volume. You know, like a lot of people would look at the way that I lift and think, oh God, you know, surely he's getting a lot of injuries. I haven't, no, touch wood again. I've had no injuries this whole year. Yeah, I've had like small niggles very, very irregularly that everyone gets when you train hard, but I've not had like a proper injury. So, you know, this way of training, if you do it right, can be totally safe and totally effective as long as you enjoy it and you you do it effectively. So, you know, yeah, I prioritize within sort of my sessions. Normally the front end of the session will be mostly like most of my compound work, and then in the latter portions of the sessions moving on to more of my isolations. My volume on compound movements is typically going to be 1 or 2 working sets. On the exercises where I'm a little bit stronger, so like leg exercises, barbell back squats, hack squats, and even leg presses, I'm typically working at 1 set per exercise because the systemic fatigue from those is pretty high. And I've noticed that if there's only certain periods in my training mesocycle where I can get away with 2 sets. And that's when, you know, stress outside of the gym is extremely low. I'm on a good run. I feel like everything's working really nicely. It's only often, you know, few occasions where I can get away with that. So typically it's 1, more presses, more isolated pulling movements, typically working up to 2, maybe even 3 sets. And those are varying rep ranges. So normally a heavier set. So typically what we call like a top set, which will be like a, you know, 6 to 9 repper. And then the back off being anywhere 12 plus, really 12 to 15 typically. Tempo kept pretty similar across most sets, maybe a little more control on the top set due to the heavier loading, and then a little bit faster tempo on the back off set, keeping reps a little bit more continuous. So that's literally like the bare knuckles of the training setup, I guess, as a whole. The split, because I know people like to know the ins and outs of the split setup. So for the majority of the off season, I've been running push, pull, off, legs off, and every other rotation, if I'm recovered enough to do so, on the day before legs, I will go in and hit a very short 35 to 45 minute arm specific day. My arms are a weak body part. So in the occasion that I have the recovery capacity to do so, and what I mean by recovery, because most people think you got the recovery to train arms, your arms are going to be fine. Like, but it's more so mentally. It's like, am I actually looking forward to that arm session, or does the only thing my body want to do is stay at home and just sit in my office and just work? There's a big difference, because some sessions can beat you up. Like, I think it was this week, we just got back from the States, the time difference, jet lag. The last thing really I wanted to go and do was arms, and it wouldn't have been an effective session, and it would have had a negative impact on the day that followed, which would have been legs. Whereas when I rested, went in for legs, was much fresher, was able to get a good quality session done. So it's more like, I guess, mental fatigue and, full body fatigue than it is just like, oh, my arm's sore. So that's the way that I tend to set up the split. And every 5 or 6 weeks, like I said, there'll be a devolume week where exercises will be reduced down to one working set across the board. Typically, I won't do rest pauses or drop sets, which are not often featured in my training. I'll do the occasional drop set on an isolation or a rest pause on an exercise, like maybe an adductor where the stack isn't particularly heavy enough, and I need to almost have an accumulating like cluster to get good work out of it and more effective reps. So yeah, that's really, really it, if I'm honest. Not much more to sort of go into on the setup side of things.
Yeah. So I like to, like, one of the things you mentioned throughout there was, you were kind of under the, do more type mentality. And that's obviously, like, I feel like we all kind of like started out there with that, right? Like it was like, just do more, train more days, like that's all it was. And like you said, more work is more work, which is good. But, I think when it comes to muscle growth, you do have to make sure that recovery is there as well too. That's going to be super important, because you can only grow from what you can, recover from. If you're not able to recover, it doesn't matter. And I think for your type of training, it does seem like the mental side of like recovery is important too, because again, you do a lower volume, but it's like you're really maximizing every set that you're doing. And with that, you need to make sure that you are mentally sharp for that. I feel like for those sets, in order to really get the most out of those.
Yeah, big time. And this is one of the, and I happily will admit this, it's one of the downsides of training the way that I do. Does everyone love going into the gym, like feeling the pressure, the weight of the logbook on their shoulders for one opportunity in a working set? And does everyone love that? No, like for a lot of people, that can be extremely mentally draining. And I've had clients where they will openly admit, I don't like this setup, and I'll change them to a different setup. They'll have more sets, slightly away from failure. So they still accumulate a good amount of effective reps, but they're not absolutely full sending it. And I must admit, that's a very small percentage of my client base, because most of my client base come to me because they watch my training and they want to train the same way.
They want to do the same.
Yeah, they want to do the same. And often it's a fleeting moment where they're like a bit tired, and instead they just devolume and then they're good to go again. So yeah, I don't think everyone loves that. It's not like, for me, it's fun. For me, it's the best part of my day. I love my training partner and my girlfriend shouting at me when I'm training. For me, that's everything about those one opportunities to progress is what I live for. I don't even live for competing, if I'm being honest. Like, I love getting on stage, but I live for training. That's my thing. So yeah, I think it's just a case of, if you're listening to this podcast and you sound like you're bursting with excitement when you hear the opportunity to have one working set and get after it, great, go for it. This training approach is going to be for you. If you've tried it and it really doesn't make you feel good, it produces a lot of anxiety, perhaps for yourself, or ruins your sleep, or your body's just not built to be able to recover from it. Maybe consistent joint pain, or, injuries or niggles, even with good execution, mobility work, all of the jazz that you need to manage to ensure that you do mitigate those things, proper exercise selection as well, then maybe it is just not for you. That is the thing, like, I think a lot of people are scared of saying it's not for me. If it's not for you, it's not for you. That's fine. Just like if you don't want to get on stage, but you love bodybuilding, you can still be like a bodybuilder. You just don't have to get on a stage. So yeah, I think it's definitely about finding what really allows you to have the best relationship with training and have the passion for it without as many sort of negatives as potentially people are running into.
Yeah. And then I guess for you, you said you work up to like one working set. So like these warm up, I'm assuming you have some like warm up sets to it. Do you kind of count
Oh, yeah.
that as any training volume, or is that just like you don't really count that at all?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's so far away from being
Got
any
you.
effective reps. It's like so a warm up for a hack, might be like one plate aside. So let's say I'm doing 6 plates, might be one plate aside for 10. There's like so many in the tank. 2 plates for side for 6, 3 plates for side for 4, 4 plates for side for 2, 5 for 1, and then I'll work at 6. So it's really, and this is something again I definitely got taught by Jordan. It's the case of like doing the least you can do to get ready. So maximizing readiness and minimizing fatigue is the goal on the warm-up sets. And I think when you look at, so obviously JP was inspired by Dorian quite a bit. When you look at Dorian and a lot of his training, he actually ended up doing, I think, a little more warm-up volume than someone like JP did. I think JP was very much in the pursuit of like absolute maximal logbook progression. That's why he ended up getting just absurdly strong across so many movements, is because he found his way to get towards like maximum strength. And then with someone maybe like Dorian, I think Dorian ran into like quite a few injuries, of course. So maybe then he started to implement a few more sets to almost act as a protective measure rather than anything else. So I think, again, find your way. If you find that the 1 rep final feeler is not good enough for you and you need a little bit more, go for a little bit more.
Yeah.
Fine tune your warm-ups, basically.
Yeah, like I mean, basically, kind of what we're saying here is like, and the more that I learn, it's like there's just really not one way. There's multiple ways, like you said, to skin the cat. You said that earlier in the episode, and this is just one of those. So I guess, what does for a session then? How many working sets do you end up doing typically? I know it's probably going to be dependent on the muscle group and things like that, but what would you say you typically do in like a session in terms of actual working sets?
Yeah, so I think probably when we look at like legs is a good one to look at. So typically across a leg session, it might be 3 to 4 working sets for hamstrings. It's going to be about 4 to 5 working sets per quads. And then, 1 adductor set, 3 calf, and then maybe 1 direct glute set. So yeah, it's pretty low volume, especially when you look at the quadricep element of it. Like 4 opportunities really to hit your quads. And that was pretty much what I ran like all prep. It would be 2 working sets on the leg extension, and it would be 1 working set on the hack and 1 working set on the leg press. So it'd be like so consistent the whole prep. And that's what I actually ran with. So funny, like, I'm not sure if you follow him, one of my clients called Adam Powell, who did really well at the Olympia. He won the Olympia in the amateurs. He has incredible quads, and everyone at the Olympia in the backstage was asking him, like, what do you do for legs? What do you do for legs? And the guy does like four working sets per week, and he did that his whole off season as well. 4 working sets, very high intensity, and he's got to extremely good level of strength where, most leg extensions he'll be, adding weight to the stack kind of thing. And, that for him was responded, has made his quads respond very, very well. Of course, it's not the same for all body parts. Like for a long time, I've had the same approach that I had for quads for chest. So I'd typically do quite low volume for chest across a push session. It would maybe be closer to 5 or 6 working sets, just because of like the inclusion of like flies and things like that. I'd typically work up a little bit more volume, but I have ventured closer towards like almost 8, sometimes even 9 work sets for chest across a session, which is every 5 days. And that's because my chest just really wasn't growing significantly from like even getting strong at low volume. It wasn't a body part that was responding significantly. It needed a little bit more work. And what I found is that even for me going higher on chest, I was still able to build strength at that volume, at a slightly higher volume threshold. So strength was still climbing, but visual fullness to the pecs was significantly better. So, for me, I obviously would, taper down that volume a little bit in a diet just to retain it. But to build muscle and something stubborn like my pecs or even my arms, they've definitely needed a little bit more volume. And, you know, in that case, I'd sometimes argue, you know, was it just my execution, that my execution has gotten better, and maybe with more skill, I've been able to actually just like execute and feel my chest a little bit more. Yeah, I'd argue that some of it is down to that, because I definitely had room to improve my presses in terms of range of motion, arm path, all of that stuff. I think I've learned a lot more about arm path in the last 2 years for like back training and chest training than ever. For me, luckily enough, it didn't really, like, my back volume is again pretty low, you know, like 5 to 6 sets for lats, maybe 3 to 4 sets for upper back across a back session. And then obviously a hip hinge, and a hip hinge is typically 1 set every 5 days. So, you know, for me, my back's luckily been a body part that even with poorer alignment, I've been able to feel things and grow things well. My partner's the complete opposite, really. She's, you know, she struggles a little bit more with feeling her back across a lot of movements that I can do a pull down that might not look like the best aligned pull down, but I have just, my whole back's on fire. And then she'll do it and she'll be like, all I feel is like traps and just everything that's not right, you know? So like my proprioception to get into the right position, even with a more poor aligned piece of kit, is really good with my back, not so good with my anterior. So again, this is where it really comes down to, and this is what I work on a lot with my clients, is like I'll set a base program, but then we'll delve into, okay, like, so how does this feel? You know, how has this felt in the past? You know, yeah, I'll look at form clips, of course, you know, look at form clips every single day to analyze. But the best thing you can really do with the client is be like, right, okay, how does this actually feel? You know, on the warm-up sets, do you even feel it in your lats? You know, you feeling it in your upper back, you know, and then before you know, tell a client the function of every muscle group, just how does it feel? It's like a good place to start. So yeah, that's the anterior muscle groups, shoulders, you know, chest. Yeah, buys and tries for me have been a body parts that I've had to work a little harder to try and find things that really do work well. But you know, yeah, posterior and legs have always been body parts that responded relatively well with lower volumes, and you know, not having to think too deeply. Don't get me wrong, I think deeply on everything now, because like you said, I'm more advanced. So, you know, just doing this or just doing that isn't going to be enough. You know, I'll look at my physique in a year's time when I compete again, and I'll be like, but what if I did do something that was aligned better, you know? You know, so I really try and get to the best exercise for me in pretty much every single body part at the moment.
Yeah, and that's why too, like when somebody asks if like, oh, how long can I, you know, when do I stop like being able to build muscle? And it's like, I feel like you know, you're always going to be able to find things I feel like that you can improve upon and that you're going to be able to make better, right? Like you said, you're going to, you know, who knows what knowledge you'll gain in the next year in terms of your body and how you can, you know, continue to optimize your training program for yourself. I guess for you then, before we kind of dive into your current like massing, what if, like, for example, there with your chest, you said you need it to kind of like, you found you need to increase volume a little bit on that. When you do that, do you have to dial back the intensity on those sets, or can you still take that close to failure like you do most of the time?
Yeah, so I do have to dial it back a little bit. Like typically, if I'm going for a 3-set approach on a compound, I'll have to do the top set can be pretty much all the way there with one slow, like one really, like basically 0 RIR. I wouldn't typically want to take a forced rep, because I find the moment the forced rep is taken, the subsequent sets are really, like, they really drop off a cliff.
Yeah.
So I have to avoid taking forced, try and still take a progression on the top. And then on the back off sets, I'd say that definitely the first back off set would be a 1 RIR. Like I would say I could go for another one, but it's going to be slow as hell. The good thing about that is that I've done hard intensity, you know, heavy intensity pressing sets for so long that I really do know where a 1 RIR is. Like I have a really good understanding as to when my last rep is going to happen. And then the second back off set, which will be the third, that's when I'll be like, okay, I can probably, take a forced here. And, that's my last set of that particular exercise. And I'll maybe take one forced rep maximum. So yeah, that's typically, so it's probably like 0 RIR with no forced, 1 RIR on the first back off set, and then 0 RIR maybe with 1 forced rep on the final back off set.
And that typically is going to be a little bit lighter weight, obviously, than that top set.
Yeah, it does creep down significantly.
Yeah.
Between the two.
Cool. Yeah, I figured if you had to go a little bit higher volume, you were going to have to probably drop that intensity just a little bit on some of those sets. But cool. So yeah, I wanted to bring up kind of your current mass gaining phase. Part of this was I had kind of seen your Instagram, and you can definitely tell that you're above stage weight, and you've definitely put on like tissue as well. And then I saw Steve Hall had a question about, and I saw you responded to it. So I was just curious. I know that obviously, for people that maybe don't have as good of an understanding of what's going on, like I know obviously you're trying to probably maximize muscle growth during this massing phase. And for you, I don't know if maybe you found that you're trying to push body weight a little bit higher. I'm just curious to kind of hear there. And I guess on top of that, is this the highest body weight that you've been? And yeah, I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean that question that came across there, I totally understand it. And I think people are also taking a little bit more from just looking at Instagram with t-shirts and shorts, things like that. So I do take progress photos. I just don't often show them because I'm a big fan of showing the process, not the outcome. And I think the outcome for me will be when I diet down and I show a picture A and picture B. And that'll be sort of, the end result of the entire process rather than little minuscule bits throughout it. So, but yeah, in terms of where I'm at, I'm 100% the heaviest that I have been. I'm about 6 to 7 pounds heavier than I've been before in the past. And in all honesty, the reason why I do that is because I know for a fact that I wouldn't be able to do what I do in the gym, especially with the non-externally stabilized exercises that I pick: barbell rows, SLDLs, barbell back squats, all of these things that challenge my entire body to hold weight in space. And also my pressing. My pressing has always been a weaker element of my training as a whole. So whereas I'd be comparable to a lot of really strong people on legs or back, I wouldn't be on pecs at all or presses. And I knew for a fact that all of the strong presses are people that have been heavy dudes at some point. Whether that heavy dude was in shape or out of shape, they've always been at some point a little heavier. And I thought, okay, right, if I can retain relatively decent body composition and I can eat well and I can still sleep and recover, I'll take my body weight up to where I know I can do my best work, which for me is this current body weight, and I'll do my best work. And that's really what I've been doing for pretty much the entire year. I had a small phase of like resetting body weight a little bit in the beginning. Actually, it was more close to April, and that was very short. It's like 4 weeks, and then ever since then I've been gradually gaining at around about 2 to 3 pounds per month. So it was a little bit faster at the front end and obviously a little bit much slower at the back end. So yeah, like very, very gradual sort of gaining, and just keeping an eye on how I feel, body composition, fitness, all of that jazz. And again, the thing is, I like you said at the start of the podcast, you sort of mentioned my condition. I know I can get into shape. I managed to get into shape in a relatively short time frame with a lot of body weight to pull off in 21. Like that's not going to happen again because I'll be able to plan a timeline to allow for that not to occur, where I'm not going to be having to lose 50 pounds in one shot. I'm not doing that again. There's just so many better ways to do it than that. So I know I can get into condition. I know that I'm not going to compete again until 2024. So this weight right now, if I'm honest, I probably won't be seeing this weight. I'm going to do a small diet in the new year that will bring me down probably around about 15 to 20 pounds. I probably won't be seeing this weight again, if I'm honest. So from that end of that diet all the way up until I start my pre-prep diet for 2024's prep, I probably won't get this heavy again. But I've cultivated a lot of strength out of getting here. And I'm confident that now that I've held these weights consistently, so some of the presses that I've done, I've been pressing these weights now for 5-6 months. I've never done that before, ever. I've always got to this, like, not even this level of strength, but just below this level of strength, maybe 5 or 10 kilos off, and then dieted. Like, I've never got here and held it. And I think that really has stepped my physique forwards across the areas I needed to improve: the delts, the pecs, the arms. I mean, even in person, when people see me in the gym at the moment, the only thing that they tend to comment on is that the fact that I take up so much more space, and that I'm starting to fill out t-shirts up here when I've got obviously a chest and like shoulder pump that I never really like did before, because I wear like clothes that just hang off me, so people can never really see what I really look like. So I don't really like to look at what I look like when I'm training. I just like to train, really. So yeah, I think it's definitely paid off. Is it an approach that I use with all of my clients? Absolutely not, because everyone has different performance set points. Not everyone can handle pushing up this level of body weight and also body fat. Like, I'm very soft, for a bodybuilder. For a general population person, like, I still have my like top 2 abs, and I still have detail in my legs, but am I anywhere near bodybuilding lean? No. Am I not? I don't need to be, and I don't want to be. And yeah, I mean, this for me, again, I feel perfectly comfortable and confident here. I don't mind the fat face. My girlfriend doesn't mind the fat face. I know I actually quite like it as well, that I know when I diet, my face changes dramatically. And I like that whole freshen up aspect of doing a diet. Like, I like getting a bit bloated and watery, and people thinking, oh my God, he's let himself go in the gym. And then they see me like do something crazy in the gym, and they're like, oh, okay, like that's maybe why he's doing it. And then of course you see people diet down, they look different. That's the whole goal as to why we do this. Can you look different with doing smaller push-ups? Absolutely, yeah, you can. You definitely can look different. You could push 25 pounds above stage weight, mini cut to 15 pounds above, go back up again, and do that process, rinse and repeat. If that's where you're doing a lot of good work, brilliant, great, because you're going to stay in like pretty good nick all the time. That's really, really cool. But for me, I know for a fact I wouldn't be able to just do what I do in the gym without getting heavier than most people do get. I've also been inspired by a lot of natural bodybuilders, to be honest. So there's been quite a few that have sort of like gone before me that did similar levels of push-ups, to sort of like note a few. So Robert Waterhouse, who's now an IFBB pro, he used to do big push-ups, and he made a lot of progress doing so. Chris McKeedy, who's called Keithy West on Instagram, he's always been 50 pounds above stage weight in his off seasons. Love handles and a rear double bicep, but yeah, I mean, he can pull 300 kilos off the floor as well for reps. I mean, there was a guy in the past called Daniel Park, who, again, he probably had he's worth looking up because he's still got his whole thing on Instagram, but he really did one of the craziest push-ups I've ever seen. As a junior, he competed, and then he stepped back on stage 2 years later. I think it was like 21 pounds heavier. And he went from a stage weight of like 178 up to 260. Wow. And he documented the whole process with pictures as well. And I was like, I mean, everyone was like intrigued of following it, because it's just something you just don't see anymore. And I think he probably would look back on that and think, might not do that to that extent again, because the diet was ugly to get him down. But I mean, the pictures don't lie. He changed his physique dramatically. And I remember seeing him at that body weight, and I was like thinking that's the first time I've seen a natural bodybuilder in an off season and thought, damn, that guy looks massive. He just looks like a beast, and I've always liked that. I've always liked looking like a big dude in the off season. When I diet down, as a natural bodybuilder, unless you're like really genetically gifted, you're not going to look massive when you diet. So you're going to be one of the smaller looking guys in the gym, but you're going to be shredded without clothes, but you're going to be a smaller looking guy in the gym. So I like having my off season feeling like I'm a big guy. To an extent, of course, there's much bigger guys in my gym, but I feel a bit bigger when I'm in an off-season phase. So I know that's kind of like a long discussion. I have a habit of talking for a long time when I'm on a topic, but I hope that makes sense and gives a little more rationale as to why I do what I do.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm a huge proponent of taking time away from dieting. And, obviously, like you said, there's going to be levels to this, right? Like a Gen Pop person, maybe we don't push it as far as you're pushing it, right? But definitely taking time out of a deficit. And, I think in certain situations too, making sure you get into a surplus, is going to be super important to really add muscle, right? And I think part of that comes from you have the confidence and like being able to get back down to where you need to be. And I think for you, it really sounds like you're at this point where you're kind of pushing that body weight to where it's like, hey, this is where I feel best performance wise, but I'm also not pushing it up too quickly and taking it too far as well, because at the same time, you do kind of have this like you need to make sure that, you want to compete. And I think you said in 2024, so that's a little over a year. So you have plenty of time to diet down. But at the same time, being a physique athlete, like you need to make sure that you don't get too far away from where you want to go as well, too. So it's kind of that like fine line of everything. And I'm assuming that's really what you've been kind of doing in this off season, is kind of, I guess, pushing that and seeing how far you can kind of go with that, really.
Yeah. And I think the big thing with these kind of push-ups as well is you have to think a bit more macro. That's what a lot of bodybuilders, I think, are just like still trying to get, is that you can't just be micro in the off season. You can't, it's not as simple as just eat and just grow and just, let your body weight do whatever. But a lot of bodybuilders do often just get to their they get to this off season weight. So they call it their off season weight, and then they just stay there, so that might be 20, 25 pound above, so you get what, 10 pounds on in the first, maybe 15 pounds on pretty quickly post show. And you got 10 pounds of wiggle room, and then you're doing a year or maybe a 2-year off season. You just stay in the same weight. Like, we know for a fact that the surplus environment's a better environment to build muscle than maintenance, especially if you're advanced. So you'd be much better off having a timeline, thinking more macro, and actually being able to plan out phases where you can come back down in body weight to then get into another growth phase. And that's what, I really love about Steve as well, is that, to reference back to Steve, obviously has a very different approach to what I do with both bodyweight and training, but he thinks macro, he goes through phases that are planned, planned out. And of course you'll auto regulate when you need to. If you're not in the right place to mini cut, something happens, maybe you're hurt or injured, have to take time off, you won't mini cut if it's in the plan. But if a maintenance phase is planned, you run the maintenance block, and then you go into a period of dieting, whatever it is. That should be, like, for me now, I have a pretty good visual timeline of every phase all the way until I start prep, which will be in like March 2024. But for a lot of bodybuilders, even at a professional level, they don't even know what they're doing in 2 weeks' time. Which, if that works for you, great. But it's kind of reverting back to the training thing. It's like you catch up with the times a little bit. It's like, if there's things that you can do better, grab hold of them, because if you're advanced, you absolutely have to look to doing better things. If you're a newbie and you're spending more time on your spreadsheet mapping out your timeline than just eating in a surplus and getting in the gym, then that's a problem. There's levels to this.
Yep.
I have to make time to plan out my timelines for my clients and for myself. I have to, because most of them are advanced. I'm advanced. So listen, I guess, listen to this podcast and really apply it to where you're at in the process. If you're new, the simplicities of you getting in the gym and eating in a surplus and not having to worry about mapping out a timeline for your first show is lovely. Enjoy that. Life's great. You can build a lot of muscle doing that. More advanced you get, the more intricacies you have to look at, the more knowledge you have to develop on training and biomechanics, the more knowledge you have to know in terms of the macro phases of bodybuilding. Those are things that, you kind of have to do if you want to progress further.
Yep. No, I agree 100% there. I think that was really well said. And I guess kind of to wrap this up for you, what has been maybe a couple challenges of pushing your body weight up? I know, like, for some people, hunger becomes an issue. Has there been anything like that for you in terms of pushing this body weight up like this?
Sure. So funny you ask. Literally until last week, no issues. The only issue that I've had happen, which was when we got back from the States, my appetite just did a complete backside on me. Like it just really, really hit me hard. I'm confident that that is down to the time difference because I was in such a good routine. You know, everything was like nailed. Bedtime the same time, wait time the same time, you know, training sessions the same. And then to flip your day to the point where you're now eating when you were sleeping and your peak body weight, it just, man, it does not work well. It does not work well. So like, that's just, I mean, I had an amazing time traveling. I was out there for 2 shows. I had to be there, but that just, I mean, traveling at peak body weight is really not easy. So yeah, I will hopefully get it back a little bit because I'm hoping to at least, I mean, I managed to maintain my body weight at the moment, but I'm hoping to at least maintain my body weight until the new year, where I'll go into sort of my like first sort of pullback phase. And yeah, the other option is obviously starting the pullback a little earlier than I wanted to. But and if that has to happen, it's not the end of the world. But I'm also gaining back training momentum at the same time. So it's I don't want to pull back until I'm at a really, really good point with everything. So yeah, but that has been the only issue. Fitness has been fine. I've kept on top of cardiovascular work. I did a good amount of hit actually, funny enough, in this off season, just on the days that would be before push, so not the days before legs, and that really worked well because I found the cross transfer to where I was lacking in fitness, which is from like high heart rate thresholds down to trying to get my heart rate down, like between, for like example, a leg press set or a Bulgarian split squat where you're completely out of breath.
Yep.
The hit would be more cross transferable with that situation than just pedaling around doing lifts or walking. So that was really beneficial. And I'd recommend that to people quite highly, actually, if they're wanting to maintain cross transferable fitness in the off season. And obviously you can recover from the hit, you know, don't put it in immediately after a diet phase, like wait until you're a bit heavier. And that's a really good tool to use.
Yeah. Cause I mean, one of the things that could potentially happen when you push that body weight up is your cardiovascular can take a hit, which you would think doesn't necessarily affect it, but that is going to affect your recovery in between, sets and stuff like that. So exactly. I think it's good, to, especially as you push that body weight higher to maintain some of that. So cool, AJ. Well, I know we went a little bit longer than what we had talked about, so I appreciate your time, man. Ton of great information here. So I guess, like I always do at the end of the episode, where would you like to lead the audience to find more about you and anything that you have to offer and stuff like that?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate your time, Jeff. Thanks very much for having me on. So in terms of people following me, so my main sort of active page is Instagram. That's AJ Morris _. I have a YouTube channel called AJ Morris. Tons of free content on there, scaling back all the way to 2014. And my new, obviously, was launched in June, Natural Bodybuilding Worldwide. So that's at naturalbbworldwide.com. And that's a membership website where you can get a free trial for 7 days. You can check it out. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. Other than that, it's $7.99 a month to be a part of that website and be a part of a community, really. There's lots of people logging in the forum section. We have athletes that share their journey, answer your questions if you've got any specific to natural bodybuilding. And equally, we have workout videos that go up there in full length and description of sort of how I train and also how other people train as well in different styles and fashions. So check that out. And yeah, appreciate you having me on.
Awesome, man. Yep, I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. And yeah, man, again, appreciate your time and we'll chat with you soon.
No worries. Chat soon.